Alright guys, today we are doing a custom fire pit build for a client. So here's a quick preview of what's going on, but we'll jump right into it. The first step is plasma cutting all the parts. So this is a hexagon kind of style. So we have 6 side walls. The client wanted 4 birds, specific types of birds included in this fire pit. I do a lot of metal birds already, so this was perfect. I just modified some of my designs and then had 2 blank sections. So basically it's 4 side walls, 6 side walls, 3 legs, 1 base that's hexagon. Geez, that's a rough one. Hexagonal. So you see me cutting the legs here. You see a big slit in the middle. That'll make sense a little bit later on. You also see I have to push down on the plate while I'm cutting. Sometimes when you're cutting, things just bubble up a bit, makes it hard on the machine if it's not sensing the height properly. Now we're going to tack everything in place. Cool thing about this design, it really just goes together. You don't really need a tape measure with all the parts cut up. The diameter of the hexagon is 3 feet. That was again per the customer's instructions. So pretty easy to scale that out when designing, and once you have all the pieces cut, you don't need a tape measure for this job. All the angles just line up geometrically. So like I said, we're just tacking everything in place. Obviously I skipped all the wire brush and cleaning of the parts after the plasma, but that's pretty straightforward. Check some older videos. I'm always grinding. It's probably the longest step in almost every project. Alright, so just bear with me as we get all the tacks in. Like I said, this kind of just goes together. Really nothing to it, just lining it up. You'll see I'm tacking just with glasses and looking away. It's the quickest way to do it. If you see on the table here, I just welded a little plate on the table. That just helps me lift up the sidewall, so there's a little bit of a ledge to weld on underneath later, and helps hold the whole fireplace in place while I'm doing all these tacks. You know, I say I am looking away while I do these tacks, but it's pretty much just a safety squint, and we'll get through it. Alright, and something else I want to mention, I do try to say it a lot, like I have a nice setup here with a 4x8 table. I can load full sheets and cut them, but this specific design, the pieces are small enough, so if you have a 4x4 table, even smaller, you can get away with this design. And you could probably go slightly larger to hit this, but you know, no matter what setup you have, you can do large projects. It's just about piecing it out. It really depends on the design. If you're willing to put stuff together, do the full welding and fabrication, you don't really need to be limited by the size of your cutting system, by the size of your shop. Obviously you can send parts out to get cut if there's certain things that aren't going to fit. The biggest piece on this is the hexagonal base. So worst case, you can get a square plate and cut it out by hand if your table's not big enough. Now we're jumping into some of the welding here. I'm just welding it from the inside as neatly as I can. It's not as important as the outside. The outside edges, I'll take a bit more time on the welding. You'll see in a moment, just because that's going to be more visible. And you know, it's a non-critical piece. Like, as long as it looks decent, fire pit, people will be happy with a nice sturdy build. Now we're on the outside. You'll see here I'm more kind of just like doing little black tacks, like stacking tacks. Might be a bit of a cop-out, but for me it's an easy way to get nicer beads. It's non-structural, so you know, judge me if you want, but it's quicker on the grinding. Not creating too much work on the finishing part. So here's the grinding. Just sit back into it, put some headphones on, and I'm sure you guys have done this before. You'll spend far more time grinding than anything else in most welding operations. Obviously depends on your industry, depends on your type of products, but for me, I'm running angle grinders more than any other piece of machinery. You know, I worked in a few shops, and never really as a laborer. I tried to be learn the front end of the business, sales, and drafting, all sorts of stuff. And I had one manager, one of my bosses, tell me something is for every minute or hour of welding you're budgeting or quoting the client, just add the same amount for finished work. Again, it depends on the type of product, but it's a good rule. It's a good thing to think of. If you're going to spend an hour welding it, just consider that you might take an hour on the cleanup work, knocking off BBs, grinding down welds, finishing. It's a good thing to consider when you're looking at how long a project's going to take or what you want to price a customer. So ground out the outside. Like I said, we ground everything flush on the outside, more finish, and then on the inside, just a quick pass over every bead, just so there's no BBs or unsightly things sticking out, and anything other than that, the paint will do us a lot of favors. Now that the bowl's all finished up, I'm onto the legs here, and you'll see this is where the slit comes into play. So it's basically a bend line, and there's an angle on these legs, so I'll bend it to what looks pretty decent, line it up along the corner of the hexagon, and it's going to give us the same angle. So as long as I bend every piece more or less the same, it'll make a nice tripod base. Anybody who build stuff will know that tripods are your friends. They're self-leveling, there's no wobbles, so this is great for most furniture, architectural applications where it's clients are considering function, setting in place. There's nothing worse than getting a table that wobbles. So these are great. Nothing like a tripod. You make it as close as you can by eye and you'll have no issues with any kind of wobble. So I'm just clamping these down. I'm grabbing an adjustable wrench, and they just bend by hand. There's about 1.5 inches on either side of material. Pretty easy to bend by hand. It's going to be uniform enough with that slit running through. And once it's all welded up, you'll see the slit on the bend line. It just looks like a design feature. Nice, sleek way to do bends when you don't have, a press. Otherwise, you'd cut this without the slit and run it through a brake. You'd struggle lining up that angle. So this is kind of a win-win. Even if you had a brake, you might want to put some kind of guidelines to bend on the plasma. You can still do something like this. So that's that. They all went pretty good. Once they're all bent up, I'm going to line them up on the corners like I mentioned and just start getting them in place. Pretty straightforward. So as long as all 3 corners of the leg are touching the piece, then you're lined up. So I'll tack the outside corners and then that middle corner, and that'll mean that every leg's on the same angle. In general, if you threw a tape measure on this, you'd be within 1/8 on the height of the total build. So it goes pretty good. So if you have any more questions about what's going on, just shoot them down below, but I'll try and just explain everything as best I can. The material I'm using is 3/16 thick material. Obviously the full construction is out of plate or sheet. You can do this out of other thicknesses. You could definitely get by making this out of 11 gauge. You could definitely go thicker, but this is like beefy enough. It's pretty heavy when it was done, definitely over 50 pounds, and it's something that would last a generation at the very least, unpainted. Obviously at the end here I'm going to hit it with some high temp paint, but it's thick enough that this won't rust out. There's some holes in the bottom of this just so that water doesn't pool up. And here's the finished product before paint. And I'm nothing fancy, just a rattle can kind of guy. So this is high tip paint, most of my projects, and it's pretty easy to communicate to customers. I just typically tell people I'll finish it with paint, and there's no questions asked. But in this case, it's high temp. Sometimes you tell people, yeah, I'll finish it with an oil-based paint, and they think that's some kind of process other than the cans of paint you're buying at hardware stores. But if you're willing to paint stuff, people are getting a finished product, and that's the way people like it. Alright guys, thanks for making it this far. As always, if you've enjoyed this build or this video, make sure you have some class. Comment down below, like the video, ask if you have any questions, subscribe for more, and if you want to suggest our next video or build, hit us up.